Welcome to my channel, Secrets Never Sleep. Please support my channel with subscribe, like, and share. Thank you. When Michael married Claire 3 years ago, he thought he finally understood what peace looked like. After years of a quiet, lonely life, Claire brought warmth into his world, a woman full of laughter, empathy, and a calm strength that made everything around her feel settled. But along with Claire came her daughter Lena, a bright, free-spirited college student who visited on weekends. Her energy so alive that she seemed to fill the whole house with it. At first, everything felt ordinary: Sunday breakfasts, late-night movies, garden talks. But lately, something had shifted, and Michael couldn't explain it. It wasn't a single moment, it was a collection of them. The way Lena began to linger longer when they spoke. The way her laughter softened when she looked at him. Or how she'd touch his arm when thanking him for something small. Harmless things, really. Until they weren't. He told himself he was imagining it. That it was just the closeness of a new family learning each other's rhythms. But deep down, Michael knew there was something beneath the surface. Something that neither of them wanted to acknowledge. One evening, Claire had to leave town for a conference. "It's just 3 days," she said cheerfully, kissing him goodbye at the door. "Lena's coming home for the weekend. You two will keep each other company." Michael smiled, pretending he wasn't uneasy. He respected boundaries, always had. He believed family ties were sacred. But that weekend, everything he thought he knew about boundaries would quietly start to blur. Lena arrived on Friday evening. Suitcase in hand, her blonde hair caught in the soft autumn light. "Hey Mike," she said, smiling. "I brought dinner." She waved a bag of takeout and stepped into the kitchen like she'd lived there forever. They talked over pasta. Their conversation easy. She told him about her new photography project. About how she missed her mom's cooking. About the city she wanted to move to after graduation. She spoke with that unstoppable energy that reminded him how young she was, how full of dreams. But there were moments that unsettled him. A glance that lasted a second too long. A question that felt too personal. "You're always alone when Mom travels?" she asked quietly, swirling her fork in her plate. Michael chuckled lightly. "I manage. It's quiet, but I don't mind it." "Quiet can be lonely," she said, looking at him in a way that made his chest tighten. He looked away, trying to shake the feeling. "That's part of life," he said softly. "We all learn to live with a little quiet." She smiled faintly. "Maybe some people just need company to fill it." The air shifted, then subtle, like the moment before rain. Michael cleared his throat, changed the subject, and tried not to think about how strange that sentence sounded, echoing in his head. The next morning, sunlight filled the kitchen. Lena was there already, wearing one of Claire's oversized sweaters, making coffee like she'd done it 100 times. "Good morning," she said warmly. "I made yours just how you like it." Michael hesitated for a second before taking the cup. "Thanks," he said. They spent the morning working in the garden. It was a simple day, pulling weeds, fixing the old bird feeder, laughing at their muddy shoes. But there was something in the air, an undercurrent of unspoken words neither dared to voice. At one point, Lena stopped and looked at him with a half-smile. "You know, you and Mom are lucky," she said softly. "You understand each other." Michael glanced at her. "We try. It's not always easy, but that's what love is." She nodded, looking thoughtful. "I wonder if I'll ever find that someone who actually listens." "You will," he said, trying to keep his tone steady. "You just have to look for someone who values the quiet moments, not just the loud ones." Her eyes met his, then clear, searching. "Like you?" she asked gently. The words hit him like a slow thunderclap. For a moment, the world seemed to still. He wanted to respond, to correct, to steer the moment back into safety, but he couldn't find the right words. Instead, he forced a smile and said quietly, "Like anyone who understands what love really means." Lena looked down, a faint blush crossing her face. "Right," she murmured. "Anyone." That evening, the wind picked up outside. They sat by the fire, talking about small things, the past, music, dreams. But underneath the laughter, there was tension. Not wrong, not inappropriate, but emotional, deep. Michael felt it, and so did Lena. Something unspoken, lingering in every pause. He stood finally, breaking the moment. "I think I'll call it a night," he said, his voice a bit rougher than usual. She looked up, her expression unreadable. "Good night, Mike," she whispered, her tone soft enough to feel like a secret. Later that night, he couldn't sleep. The house was quiet except for the sound of rain tapping against the windows. He replayed every moment in his head, the laughter, the looks, the strange stillness between them. He told himself it was innocent, that he was overthinking, that tomorrow would be normal again. But deep down, something told him that a line had already been crossed, not with words, not with touch, but with emotion. And that kind of line was far more dangerous. The next morning, he would discover something that made it impossible to ignore what was happening. Something small, but enough to change everything he thought he understood about love, loyalty, and boundaries. The next morning began with sunlight spilling through the curtains, warm and gentle, but Michael's chest still felt heavy. The storm that had rolled through the night seemed to have carried something strange with it. A quiet tension still lingered in the air, invisible but unmistakable. He walked into the kitchen to find Lena sitting at the table, her laptop open, camera beside her, editing photos. She looked peaceful, absorbed in her work, her hair loosely tied back. "Morning," she said brightly, glancing up. "You were up late." Michael nodded, pouring himself coffee. "Yeah, couldn't sleep. Storm kept me awake." She smiled faintly. "Or maybe your thoughts did." He looked at her for a brief second, caught off guard by the tone in her voice. There was no teasing in it, just a quiet truth. He didn't answer. Instead, he sipped his coffee, trying to focus on the sound of birds outside. "Want to see my project?" she asked suddenly, breaking the silence. "It's about emotion, how people hide what they really feel behind smiles." He walked over slowly and stood behind her chair. On the screen were a series of portraits, faces filled with expression, joy, loneliness, wonder. But as he scrolled, one photo made his breath catch. It was of him. He hadn't known she'd taken it, but there it was, him standing by the window last night, staring out into the rain. The lighting was soft, golden from the lamp, and the reflection in the glass made his face look distant, almost sad. Lena turned to look up at him. "You looked lost," she said quietly. "I wanted to capture it. I hope you don't mind." He didn't know what to say. "You should have told me," he finally managed. She shrugged gently. "I didn't want to interrupt." It was honest. The room felt smaller, suddenly. The picture wasn't inappropriate, it was artful, emotional, but it revealed something too private, too personal. Like she had seen a part of him he wasn't ready for anyone to see. He stepped back, needing space. "It's a good photo," he said softly, "but maybe keep it just for yourself." "Okay." Lena looked at him for a long moment before nodding. Of course. The day passed slowly. They went about their routines, keeping things polite, simple, and quiet. But the unspoken energy between them refused to fade. Later that afternoon, Lena went for a walk. Michael stayed behind, trying to focus on work. But when his phone buzzed with a notification, he froze. It was a message from Lena. "You ever feel like you're in the wrong story?" He stared at the screen, unsure what to think. He typed back slowly. "Sometimes, but that's when you remember who wrote it." There was no reply for a while. When she finally came back home, she didn't mention the message. They acted as if nothing had happened, yet both knew something had changed. That evening, while making dinner, Lena spoke softly without looking at him. "You're easy to talk to, you know that. Mom's lucky." Michael paused with the knife halfway through a tomato. "She's wonderful." "She really is." "I know," Lena said, smiling faintly. "But sometimes I think she doesn't see what I see." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "What do you see, Lena?" She hesitated, then said softly, "Someone who listens. Someone who actually understands silence." He wanted to say something, to set a line clearly, gently, but the words wouldn't come. There was no malice, no disrespect, just emotion, raw and real. "Lena," he said finally, keeping his voice calm. "You're young, you feel things deeply, but sometimes feelings can confuse what's real." She nodded, but her eyes glistened, slightly, as if she understood what he was really trying to say, and it hurt. "I know," she whispered. "I just wish I didn't." That night, after dinner, she excused herself early. The house fell silent again. Michael sat alone in the living room, the fire flickering low. On the coffee table lay her camera, forgotten. Curious, he picked it up, then froze when he saw the most recent photo. It wasn't of the storm or the garden. It was a picture of him smiling faintly, unaware she was even there. There was something about it. Not romantic, not wrong, but intimate, as if she'd captured how she saw him, not as her stepfather, but as something more complicated. He set the camera down carefully, heart pounding. Outside, the wind howled again, and inside, the air felt too heavy to breathe. He knew he had to talk to her the next day. to clear the air before things drifted any further. But what he didn't know was that Lena was already planning to tell him something that would make it nearly impossible to go back to how things were. The next morning arrived, gray and quiet. The rain had stopped, but the clouds hung low, heavy with the kind of silence that follows something unspoken. Michael woke early, restless, and stood by the window with a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. He kept thinking about the photograph. It wasn't just a picture, it was a reflection of something he hadn't meant to let exist. He heard footsteps on the stairs. Lena appeared in her sweatshirt, hair messy, eyes still tired but soft with that same quiet warmth that always disarmed him. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked. He shook his head. "No. Guess my mind's working overtime." She smiled faintly. "Mine too." They sat at the kitchen table, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. There was an invisible wall between them, now thin, fragile, but necessary. Michael finally spoke. "Lena, we should talk about yesterday." Her eyes flickered with both fear and relief. "I know," she said quietly. "I've been thinking about it all night." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Lena took a deep breath and said, "You don't have to say anything. I know what you're thinking. That I've been different." Michael stayed still, careful, listening. "I didn't mean to make things uncomfortable," she said softly, her voice trembling. "It's just, after Mom married you, everything changed. You listened. You noticed things. You made this house feel alive again." "Lena, let me finish," she interrupted gently. "I know how it sounds, but it's not what you think. I don't want to cross any lines. I just needed you to know that sometimes feelings don't ask for permission, they just show up." Her words hit him harder than he expected. There was no accusation in them, no drama, just raw honesty, the kind that left no room for judgment. He took a slow breath. "Lena, I care about you deeply. You've become a part of my life in ways I never expected, but caring has to stay where it belongs, or it stops being love and starts being damage." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "I know. That's why I'm telling you. I don't want to ruin what we have. I just couldn't keep pretending I didn't feel it." The air between them thickened, heavy with the weight of what had just been said. Michael leaned forward slightly, his voice low but kind. "You have a beautiful heart. Lena, don't mistake connection for something it isn't. Sometimes the people who make us feel most seen are just meant to help us grow, not stay." Tears slid silently down her cheeks. "I wish I'd met you some other way," she whispered. He swallowed hard, the ache in his chest almost unbearable. "Then maybe it wouldn't have meant as much," he said quietly. The rest of the morning passed in near silence. They both knew they had reached an edge neither of them wanted to fall from. When Claire called around noon to check in, her cheerful voice filled the air like sunlight breaking through fog. "How are my two favorite people?" she asked, laughing. Michael met Lena's eyes briefly, both forcing a smile. "We're good," he said, steady but tired. "Just missing you." Lena leaned closer to the phone. "Yeah, Mom, come home soon." "Okay," Claire chuckled. "One more day, sweetheart. I'll bring that pie you love." When the call ended, the silence returned, but full of things that didn't need to be said anymore. That evening, Michael found Lena in the living room, sorting through her photographs. She looked calm again, almost peaceful. "I deleted the photo," she said without looking up. He hesitated. "You didn't have to." "I did," she replied softly. "Some things are better remembered, not captured." He nodded slowly. "You're right." She smiled faintly. "Don't worry, I'm not running away. I just needed to understand where I stand. And now I do." There was strength in her voice, a quiet maturity he hadn't noticed before. That night, before heading upstairs, she paused at the bottom of the stairs and turned to him. "Thank you," she said gently. "For what? For not making me feel ashamed of my heart?" He smiled sadly. "There's nothing shameful about feeling, Lena. It's what makes us human." She nodded and disappeared upstairs, leaving him alone in the dim light, staring into the quiet house that suddenly felt both full and empty at once. But peace wouldn't last long, because when Claire returned the next day, she would sense something in the air, something she couldn't quite name, and the question she'd ask that night would unravel everything. Michael thought he had managed to hold together. Claire's arrival the next afternoon should have filled the house with joy, but instead, the air felt heavy. Even the sound of her suitcase wheels across the floor seemed too loud. "Home sweet home," she said cheerfully, setting her bags down and kissing Michael on the cheek. "I missed you." He smiled, steady but careful. "Missed you too." Lena came downstairs a few moments later, hair tied back, smile bright but forced. Hey Mom. Claire hugged her tightly. There's my girl. She pulled back, eyes narrowing slightly. You two look like you've had a quiet weekend. Michael chuckled softly. Quiet's one word for it. Lena laughed faintly, her tone too light to be real. We just stayed in mostly. Rain didn't really let up. Claire didn't question it, at least. Not yet, but as the evening unfolded, she began to sense it. The unspoken distance. The subtle stiffness in every pause. Dinner that night was calm but unnatural. Lena spoke less. Michael focused on small talk, work, weather, Claire's conference, but even the clatter of forks couldn't drown the tension that lingered in the air. When Lena excused herself early, Claire turned to Michael, frowning slightly. She seems different. Michael hesitated. She's growing up, Claire. Sometimes that comes with silence. Claire studied him for a long moment, her eyes soft but searching. You seem different too. He looked down at his plate, unsure how to answer. Just tired, he said quietly, but Claire wasn't convinced. Later that night, after Lena went to bed, Claire sat beside him on the couch, legs tucked under her, watching him carefully. The fireplace cast long soft shadows across the room. Michael, she said finally, something's off. I can feel it. You've been distant, and Lena seems, I don't know, confused. He met her gaze, steady but sad. Nothing's wrong, Claire. We just had a few deep talks about her future, college, life. She's been processing a lot. Claire tilted her head. Deep talks. Yeah, he said softly. She's emotional these days. I tried to be there for her. Claire smiled gently, though a flicker of worry crossed her face. You're good with her. She trusts you more than anyone. Those words meant as comfort felt heavier than she knew. I just hope I'm doing the right thing, he said quietly. You always do, Claire said, resting her head on his shoulder. But even as she said it, a quiet question lingered in her tone. The next morning, Claire decided to make pancakes their usual Sunday ritual. Lena joined her in the kitchen, helping mix the batter. Did you and Michael get along okay while I was gone? Claire asked casually. Lena froze for just a second before forcing a smile. Of course. He's great. Claire looked at her, sensing the hesitation. You sure? You seem distracted. Lena shrugged. Just tired, Mom. But her voice cracked slightly, so faintly, it could have gone unnoticed. Except Claire noticed everything when Michael walked in moments later. Their eyes met across the kitchen. It was only for a second, but Claire saw something in a kind of carefulness. Not guilt, not discomfort, something gentler, something she didn't yet understand. That evening, Claire cornered him gently while Lena was upstairs. I'm not trying to pry, she began softly, but I know that look in your eyes. You're holding something in. Michael sighed deeply. Claire, there's nothing to worry about. Really? Then why do you sound like you're convincing yourself? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared into the fire again, the same spot he'd sat alone in the night before she came home. Because, he said finally, sometimes life gives you moments that test everything you believe about trust, love, and where lines belong. I just don't want to fail any of them. Claire frowned, not understanding. Fail who? He looked at her, eyes heavy, heartful, and said softly, you, her, myself. She reached out, taking his hand, concern deepening. Michael, what happened? Before he could answer, Lena's voice called from the stairs. Mom, can I talk to you? The timing was no accident. Claire looked between them, confused but worried. Of course, sweetheart. Lena stepped into the room slowly, her face pale but resolute. I think there's something you should know, she said quietly. Michael's stomach turned cold. Claire looked from her daughter to her husband, the question already forming in her eyes. About what? Lena swallowed hard. About this weekend. About me? And in that fragile silence, as rain began to fall again outside, Michael knew that whatever peace they'd tried to protect was about to shatter. The room went utterly still, the kind of silence that makes your heartbeat feel too loud. Claire's eyes moved from Lena to Michael, her face a mixture of confusion and quiet fear. About you? Claire asked gently. Sweetheart, what's wrong? Lena stood by the edge of the couch, fingers nervously gripping the hem of her sleeve. Her voice trembled slightly, but her tone stayed calm. I think I crossed a line. I didn't mean to. Michael's heart pounded. He could feel every breath sticking in his throat. Crossed a line, Claire repeated, frowning. What do you mean? Lena swallowed, her eyes glistening. I said some things this weekend I shouldn't have. Things that came from confusion, not intention. I let my emotions speak before my sense did. Claire blinked, glancing quickly at Michael, searching his face for context. What kind of things? Lena's voice broke a little. I told Michael that I admired him, that he made me feel understood, but I didn't realize how unfair that was to both of you. Michael exhaled slowly, trying to stay composed. Claire's expression softened, but her shoulders stayed tense. Lena. I'm not blaming him, Lena said quickly, her words tumbling out. He didn't do anything wrong. He was kind, maybe too kind, but I was the one who read too much into it, and I needed you to hear it from me. For a long moment, no one spoke. The fire cracked quietly in the corner, filling the silence with its low hum. Michael finally said softly, Lena's right. She opened up, and I listened. Maybe I should have handled it better, but there was nothing inappropriate, just a conversation that went too deep, too fast. Claire leaned back, exhaling a shaky breath, relief mixed with uncertainty. I appreciate your honesty, both of you. She turned to her daughter, eyes gentle but serious. Lena, you've always been passionate, you feel things deeply, but sometimes, admiration can look like something else when we're searching for comfort. Lena nodded tearfully. I know, I just didn't want to keep it inside. I didn't want it to become something worse. Claire reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. You did the right thing by speaking up. It takes courage to face your feelings and own them. Michael watched them quietly, feeling something shift deep inside him. The truth had come out not in flames, but in grace. Still, he felt a hollow ache knowing that something fragile had been lost between all three of them. Trust, innocence, ease. Later that night, after Lena went upstairs, Claire lingered by the fireplace again. You handled that well, she said softly, staring into the flames. I didn't feel like I did, he murmured. You did, she replied. You didn't run from it. You didn't hide. That's what matters. He nodded, though his chest still felt heavy. She's a good kid, just caught between growing up and figuring out what love really means. Claire sighed. Aren't we all? Her words hung in the air, tender, knowing. The following morning, the tension had eased a little. Claire made breakfast, humming softly. Lena joined them, quieter than usual but with a genuine smile. It wasn't perfect, but it was healing. Michael noticed how she looked lighter now. Like confessing had freed her from something heavy. He admired that. Not the feeling that had caused the rift but the courage that had fixed it. As they sat around the table, the conversation drifted to simple things again: college plans, Claire's work, their upcoming family trip. The normalcy felt like a gift. After breakfast, Lena pulled Michael aside as Claire washed the dishes. Her voice was low, sincere. Thank you, she said. For what? For not letting me make a bigger mistake, she whispered. You could have ignored me or made me feel foolish, but you didn't. You reminded me who I want to be. Michael smiled softly. You're already her, Lena. You just needed to see it. She nodded, tears filling her eyes again, but this time, they weren't from confusion. They were from peace. That evening, Michael stood outside watching the sunset, the sky painted in deep orange and violet. Claire joined him quietly, slipping her hand into his. She's learning, Claire said gently. So are we, he replied. They stood together in silence, the wind brushing through the trees, their hearts steady again. But as the first stars appeared in the sky, Claire spoke softly, her voice calm but curious. Michael, she said, when she said she crossed a line, did it make you see your own differently? He turned to her, surprised. What do you mean? Claire met his gaze, her expression unreadable. Sometimes, even when we don't do anything wrong, our hearts notice things we wish they hadn't. Her words lingered like a quiet truth neither of them could deny, because love, even the most loyal kind, always has its edges. And sometimes, understanding those edges was what saved a family, or broke one. The days that followed moved slower, softer. Autumn deepened around their little home, the leaves turning gold. The evenings growing cooler, and with them, the quiet between the three of them began to feel different, not tense anymore, just thoughtful, healing. Michael had spent most of his life believing that love was about possession, about promises and permanence, but now, he was learning that love was also about distance, the courage to keep what's sacred. And sometimes, that meant stepping back instead of reaching forward. One Saturday morning, a week after the confession, Lena was getting ready to return to campus. The house buzzed with the usual sounds of her packing drawers closing, the rustle of clothes, the soft hum of Claire's voice as she double-checked the list of things Lena might forget. Did you get your charger? Claire called from the hallway. Got it? Lena replied, stuffing it into her bag. She turned to Michael, who stood by the door, holding the car keys. Thanks for everything this weekend, she said, her smile a little brighter now, a little steadier. He nodded. You don't have to thank me, Lena. I do, she said, her tone sincere. For listening, for not judging, for treating me like I wasn't broken. He looked at her. Ellie looked at her, not as the girl who had confused her emotions, but as the young woman she was becoming. Strong, honest, brave enough to face her truth. I didn't fix anything, he said softly. You did that yourself? Her eyes shimmered. Still, I'll never forget what you said, that real love doesn't always move closer. Sometimes it just stands quietly and protects. Michael smiled. That's what family is supposed to do. The drive to campus was quiet, comfortable this time. They talked about small things: music, her classes, Claire's upcoming work trip. When they arrived, Lena reached over and gave him a quick, gentle hug. I'm okay now, she whispered. Really? He believed her. And as he watched her walk toward her dorm, the wind tugging at her hair, he realized that the ache in his chest wasn't confusion anymore. It was peace. The kind that comes when you've finally done the right thing, even when it hurts a little. That evening, back home, Claire found him sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the fading light. She joined him, leaning against his shoulder. She seems lighter, Claire said. She is, he replied quietly. She faced herself. Claire smiled softly. You helped her do that. He shook his head. We both did. You raised her, to be honest. I just reminded her how to use it. Claire was quiet for a moment, then said, You know, when she told me everything that night, I was scared. Not of you, never that, but of what honesty might do to us. And somehow, it made us stronger. Michael turned to her, meeting her gaze. Sometimes the hardest truths are the ones that keep us human. She nodded, slipping her hand into his. And sometimes they remind us what love really means. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in a soft, dusky glow, Michael thought about the strange way love had shaped all three of them, how fragile it could be, how easily misunderstood, and yet, how deeply it could heal when handled with care. Boundaries weren't walls, he realized. They were bridges, ones that guided hearts safely toward understanding, not away from it. That night, for the first time in weeks, the house was silent but not heavy, just peaceful. Claire leaned against him and whispered, We're going to be okay, aren't we? Michael smiled faintly. We already are. Months later, Lena sent them a framed photograph for Christmas, a picture she had taken from her campus window. The caption at the bottom read, Sometimes distance is love too. Michael stood there, holding the photo, feeling his throat tighten. Claire glanced at him, smiling. She learned from the best. He laughed softly. No, he said, his eyes misting over. She just learned what love really is. And though the story began with blurred boundaries and unspoken emotions, it ended with something stronger: understanding, respect, and a love that chose to protect rather than possess. Because sometimes the bravest kind of love is the one that knows when to step back. The end.